And Cheney was so, he said, I really want to thank you. He said, now I'm so glad that I actually endorsed you. It's amazing, but that you would do this. And I didn't speak to him about it. But then, go a couple of years forward or go now. And I don't blame him for sticking with his daughter, but his daughter is a very dumb individual, very dumb. She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. When the guns are trained on her face. They're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy. But she's a stupid person. And I used to I'd have meetings with a lot of people, and she always wanted to go to war with people. So whether it's her, whether it's Dick, I was surprised a little bit with Dick Cheney. I didn't know him at all. I only had essentially the 1 or 2 phone calls, and it was only a call saying, thank you very much for doing that for Scooter Libby. That was nice. And Scooter Libby, by the way, was beyond that. He couldn't believe that it happened. Nobody would do it. They should have done that for him years before. But I was a little surprised because I actually thought that Dick Cheney would go with me over his daughter, and he didn't. And you know what? I understand it. It's your daughter, and you go. But she's a bad person.
All right, guys. So once again, we got to talk about the fake performative outrage from the mainstream liberal media in their attempt to sway the outcome of the election in favor of Kamala Harris. Because at this point, the mainstream liberal media is an arm of the Democrat Party. They are state-sponsored media, okay? And their jobs is to try to sway the masses in favor of voting for Kamala Harris, okay? And they've just taken the hood off. They've taken the mask off. And they say, you know what? We don't care how much credibility we lose. We're going to overtly cheer for Kamala Harris. We're going to overtly distort the truth, okay? And we're going to do what we got to do in order to try to get Kamala elected. However, I think this is going to backfire. I think part of the reason why Kamala Harris is struggling compared to her predecessors is because of the gaslighting, not just from the Democrat Party, but from the media as well, too, okay? And this story is another example of what I'm talking about, as they're desperately trying to avoid having a conversation about Joe Biden calling Trump supporters garbage, and Mark Cuban coming out and saying that Trump has never surrounded himself with smart, intelligent, strong women. Okay, basically saying that all Trump supporting women are dumb and stupid. Okay, things that if a Republican said or Republican surrogate said, they would be outraged about, but they're not outraged about it. In fact, they're going out of their way to try not to talk about it, which is what they're doing here with this fake outrage over Trump's comments about Liz Cheney being a warmonger, in which he clearly, as you guys saw at the beginning of this video, said that, hey, warmongers like Liz Cheney always want to send young Americans off to die, okay, without having to go to war herself, right? And individuals like that, maybe, just maybe, if they experience the hell of war, right? If Liz Cheney was sent off to fight in a war, maybe she wouldn't be so quick to want to start one, right? That was the point that Trump was making. The context of what he was saying, it is super obvious what he was saying, okay? This is something that's commonly done a lot, is when people have an issue with somebody's position, they say, okay, well, maybe somebody should experience X, Y, and Z in order to change their position or understand why their position is wrong. This is done all the time, is said all the time, is not a threat. And, no reasonable person will ever interpret it as a threat. But because the mainstream liberal media, they're not reasonable, right? They're severely Trump deranged. That is how they are interpreted, okay? They're boohoo, whining, and crying, claiming that Trump wants to have Liz Cheney be killed via a firing squad, which is essentially all of these headlines here from the liberal media, right? Even though Trump never actually used the term firing squad. But this is, again, the conclusion that they are coming to. Take a look.
It's unconscionable.
What is this message?
It's unconscionable. I don't know how Republican leaders, many of whom served with Liz Cheney and at one point considered her a colleague and friends, cannot denounce this. It is dangerous. It's escalatory. He's also already called for war, tribunals against her when he's back as president. It is so unpresidential, reckless, and dangerous, and it needs to be universally condemned.
You heard the vice president talk exactly about things like this on Tuesday night in her closing argument.
Donald Trump is so all consumed by his grievances. The people who he disagrees with and who he sees as opposing him politically, he treats as enemies. He spent the last month talking about the enemy from within the United States. And now he's going after Liz Cheney with this dangerous, violent rhetoric. I mean, think about the contrast between these two candidates. You have Donald Trump, who's talking about sending a prominent Republican to the firing squad, and you have Vice President Harris talking about sending one to her cabinet.
I don't think you even need to call it fired upon. He's saying quite explicitly and unambiguously that Liz Cheney should be shot, should be executed by firing squad.
4 days out from Election Day, and former President Donald Trump is escalating his violent rhetoric, suggesting one of his most prominent critics, the former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, should be fired upon.
Your reaction to what Donald Trump said about Liz Cheney?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it was completely inappropriate, dangerous, and unbecoming of a leader. Mr. Trump was literally going after someone who doesn't agree with him. So it shouldn't be a surprise when people come on TV and feel the need to agree with him.
As 9 barrels, when he says 9 barrels shooting at her, that obviously evokes images of a firing squad. It evokes images of an execution.
Let's execute a political opponent who happens to be a woman because I don't like her. And like, does that pull more low propensity voters in his coalition to the polls? I honestly don't think so.
And I don't blame him for sticking with his daughter, but his daughter is a very dumb individual, very dumb. She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face. You know, they're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy. But she's a stupid person.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that, okay? Trump clearly is not calling for Liz Cheney to be executed, okay? Trump is simply just making the point that she's never experienced war. And as somebody who's never experienced war, she's making decisions in which she's sending people off to die in a war. And she's doing that in a way that is reckless, right? And she's only doing it because she's never experienced war herself. That is the point. Everybody knows that is the point. But once again, we have a situation where Trump is saying something in which the media completely takes out of context. They spin it into something that is not, and then they lob it up for the Kamala Harris campaign to try to slam dunk on, right? That is what's happening, guys, right? Every single time. It's the same pattern over and over and over again. Let's take something Trump said, let's spin it, and then let's make it something that is not, and then give it to the Kamala campaign and say, hey, dunk this, right? Score on this, okay? We just served you up some propaganda. I mean, they're just working on behalf of the Democrat Party. That's what's happening. And again, it's no coincidence that every single time they do this, the Kamala campaign, they run with the same propaganda. Every single time, okay? Like I'm going to protect women comments, right? Trump says, I'm going to protect women whether they like it or not. The media spins that into something that it's not. Trump was clearly talking about protecting women from illegal immigrants, but the media spins it into some conversation about abortion, right? This is what they do. And then lo and behold, Kamala Harris is talking about it as if Trump was talking about it in the context of abortion. But again, they never do this with Democrats. You know how I know they never do this with Democrats? Well, it's because the Democrat governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, made similar comments about J.D. Vance when it comes to abortion, in which he suggested that J.D. Vance or one of his family members have to go through a rape in order to understand why women need abortion. This is the comment that he made, in which the mainstream liberal media, they did not boo-hoo, whine, and cried outrage over this comment. Take a look.
I mean, think about what some people have had to go through because of these laws. I mean, J.D. Vance calls pregnancy resulting from rape inconvenient. Like, inconvenience is traffic. I mean, make him go through this.
Yeah. So where was the mainstream liberal media outrage over these comments? There was none, right? They were not outraged over this at all. They didn't care that he said it at all, okay? And that's the difference here, guys. This is why the media is not to be trusted. This is why they're losing credibility. This is why their favorability ratings are the lowest of all time. Because if we had an honest media, they would actually be having a conversation about the real issues in regards to the point that Trump was making, which is that, hey, these warmongers love to send young American men off to die in pointless wars. Why doesn't the media ever talk about that, right? Why doesn't the media ever criticize our politicians and their decisions when it comes to war, right? Why don't they do that? Why don't they actually talk about the actual issue that Trump was addressing? Why don't they do that? If they actually did that, I don't know, maybe they would have some credibility. But they do this all the time. They ignore the overall point that Trump was making. They take what he says out of context and they blow it up into something that is not. While, again, missing the whole point because they don't want to talk about the point, right? And in fact, they do this in order to distract people from the actual point that Trump was making, okay? Which is about the American war machine. Now, it was so obvious that what Trump said, again, was not a call for Liz Cheney to be executed, that even Joe Walsh, who's a never Trumper, okay, he came out here and essentially went off on the liberal propagandists in the media for taking this clip out of context, for trying to spin this into something that is not, okay? So when the never Trumpers are coming out here and saying, nah, this is not okay, you should not be doing this, you know that, again, this is just flat out propaganda. So let's read this. Quote, Trump did not call for Liz Cheney to be executed. This is what's wrong with our politics today. Look, you know how I feel about Trump, and I've been out there every day for 2.5 months campaigning my ass off to help get Kamala Harris elected, but this short clip is so deceptive. Trump is not calling for Liz Cheney to be executed in front of a firing line. He's not listening to the entirety of what he said in Trump's typically stupid, ugly fashion. He's trying to make a point about Cheney's stance on war. But Aaron, who I like and respect, by posting only this 11-second clip makes it look like he's calling for her to be executed. He's not. He's an utterly horrible human being who's utterly unfit for office, but the truth should always matter. And the truth is that Trump is not calling for Liz Cheney to be executed, but this 11-second clip will have a gazillion views and the truth will have just a handful of views. Yeah. So, I mean, apparently in liberal world, the truth doesn't matter, right? If you're trying to, smear Trump, okay, which is essentially the point that Joe Walsh is making here, in the sense that you can't do this, right? You can't distort the truth just to go after Trump, right? Like, that's not okay. But again, in today's liberal media environment, it is okay, right? They think that it is okay for them to distort the truth in order to attack Trump and to defend Democrats. So Aaron Rupert, who is a liberal media propagandist, got extremely upset about this. He says, honestly, Joe, what the F? I don't appreciate being called deceptive when the clip is literally a direct quote of something Trump said. Get out of here with this contrarian nonsense. This is what they do when you're somebody who tries to be fair and balanced, right? At least sometimes, okay? Because again, this individual, Joe Walsh, is extremely Trump deranged, so I don't want to give him too much credit. But anytime an individual actually, is trying to be honest, okay? When it comes to Trump, they say, oh, well, you're just trying to be contrarian. You're just trying to both sides this, right? This is what they call it, okay? Both sidesism, okay? And they get upset about that. They get upset about that quite a bit. Joe Walsh says, respectfully, my friend, posting that 11-second clip without the context of what he was saying is deceptive. You should have posted the entirety of what he said. Thanks. Well, no, if they did that, then they couldn't outrage by it, right? They could not outrage over it if they posted the entire clip. This is why he didn't post the entire clip, because he only posted what he wanted his followers to see, right? And see, this is the type of thing that, as a commentator, I have to make decisions about this every single day in regards to the clips I show you guys. And I know some of you guys complain about my clips being too long, but the reason why I play clips longer than I probably should is because I want people to get the full context, right? I never want to be one of these people that plays clips out of context and try to distort the actual meaning of what somebody's saying, right? I want to play the clip in full context, which means that, yeah, you're going to have to play a long clip, right? Because in the full context of a conversation, there's a lot of things that can be said in which if you clip just a small part of it, you're going to make somebody seem like they're saying something that they're not saying. And these propagandists know this, and that's like the most frustrating part about it, because again, they get so hurt when you criticize them and call them out for being the propagandists that they are, when you do not respect them as journalists. But it's like, yo, as a commentator, right? Somebody who actually, you know, is covering the news just like you guys are covering the news, except, again, I don't claim to be a journalist. Why is it that my standards are higher than yours, right? Especially when it comes to presenting what somebody's saying to the audience. I go out of my way to try not to do what the liberal media does when it comes to how they cover Trump, right? Because, again, it's dishonest and it distorts the truth. When it comes to Democrats, though, I mean, let's be honest. I don't even have to use clips out of context to make it seem like they're saying something crazy, because they just say crazy things in context, right? So it is what it is. But I'm just saying, right? It's really, really, really sad that this is the current state of journalism, which is just to be overt Democrat Party propaganda. So at this point, again, we're not just against Kamala Harris, right? We're also competing against the media. Okay, we're competing against the machine. And that's why it's so important that we win this election, because winning this election, again, is not just a victory over Democrats. It's also a victory over the mainstream liberal media and the propaganda and the lies and the deception. And that's what people have to remember when they're going to vote. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.